Welcome to Coffee Break with Rachel Vigil, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel Vigil.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Week 2, day 1, wrapping up yesterday. You got Broncos back in pads again. But what the heck happened yesterday? How should you be feeling going into it? We got everything that we need to go over in the next 15 minutes because Sean Payton talked about it was another ramp-up day on Monday. Pads were on again. That was the first day for pads, but pads today are back on, which Brandon Stokely says is pretty unusual. You don't typically see back-to-back days in pads, but here's what's changed. You don't get as much time anymore. Brandon Stokely goes on 104 Through the Fan. I was listening to it as I was driving into practice yesterday, and he's talking about how so much has changed when it comes to practices now. They only have one practice. You used to have one in the morning, one in the afternoon. You'd have meetings all throughout the day. So you'd have one like padded practice in front of the media, another one not, more of a walkthrough. But now it's just one practice altogether. And now you see why they're wearing pads back-to-back days. Here's the other thing that's interesting. You have a 3 quarterback competition. So you kind of can't afford to take off the pads for one of them. You can't have the pads on for Jared Stidham Day and not on for Bo Nix. You can't have the pads on for Bo Nix, but not for Zach Wilson. You have to keep the pads on for all 3 of these guys so you can get a look at what they're all going to look like in pads, how everybody is adjusting. And that goes for all of the competition. And there is another competition we'll get to down later on, as you can see on our rundown. But it's a ramp-up period. And it was fascinating to see Sean Payton kind of talk at the podium after practice, kind of going through everything you can tell in his mind. He just kind of word vomits, kind of like I do, I guess, here on Coffee Break, but just going through everything that he's talking about. And one of the things that he really touched on was managing the installs. And we kept hearing the word install for OTAs, for mini camp, back at training camp. And it's like, okay, Sean, what's the install? What are we going through? And what's the point of these installs? Well, one, you're of course trying to figure out everything to go on your offense, your defense, all of that jazz. But the reason it's so important to talk about managing these installs is because you're seeing the growth for each player as they go through the exact same routine every single time as you're going through these installs. So for day 1, you have your install, you're managing it, and you're seeing how far they came from OTA install, how they looked in mini camp install, and where they look now, and how much growth they've all had. And it's fascinating to just kind of hear Sean Payton discuss all of those things when it comes to the installs. So I'm excited to see where they're at. Again, next week when we go through, I'm assuming the same exact install. I think we're going to be seeing these installs until they decide who's going to be their quarterback and kind of narrow it down a little bit. So I'm excited to see that. One of the things Sean Payton also mentioned about wanting to clean up, and we've heard a lot of yelling around this time, but the snap count. Got to be able to get it down. We've seen them restart on multiple occasions as well. So that was one of those things where I feel like we've all paid attention to it already, but to hear Sean Payton sit down and be like, no, we need to figure that out. We need to get better at that was also pretty nice. Another thing I feel like a lot of people who are on the Hill are watching, and they always kind of wonder, well, clearly that would have been a sack on Bo Nix, or clearly Javonte Williams would have got tackled on that front. But why don't they stop the play? Sean Payton discussed how that is kind of a main thing of just making sure that you finish out the entire play. Because if you're going to take that snap and you're going to use that play, you might as well finish it out regardless. So just a few small things that do add up in the grand scheme of things when it comes to practice and managing these installs. And again, that ramp up period that Sean Payton is continuing to talk about. I think we're going to have at least one more day of the ramp up, practices, because Zach Wilson will be getting the ball today. So how will that look? What will he look like with the ones and all of that jazz? And then will we see another, ramp up install essentially for the next 3 days out there on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday? We'll get into that. But Bo Nix was with the ones on Monday. Zach Wilson will be with the ones on Tuesday. Bo got a loud ovation when it came to the 7-on-7 drill on his very first one. He ran, though. And yes, when you think about it, we've been giving Zach Wilson a lot of grief for running on it. It wasn't exactly great for Bo to be running on it. It means the offensive line crumbled, the pocket crumbled, so he was having to move very quickly. But of course, just like we mentioned, you're having to finish out the plays. You're running all over the place, and that's exactly what Bo Nix did, which got the crowd pretty happy. But really, they probably shouldn't have been cheering, because that meant it probably would have been a sack. But he does move. He's nice and speedy. He's quick. His thighs are massive, you guys. not running back massive, but I feel like quarterback massive. They're huge. So the ability that he has to run, and he is pretty quick for being a quarterback. I'm not going to say that he's going to be the fastest guy out on the team by any means, but relatively the dude can move, which is good because I feel like the offensive line might be a little rough, despite how much they're getting paid this year, which we can dive into all of that too, because I'm going to be talking a little bit about the defensive line here at the end of the show. But yes, who can be that dog? We'll get into that when it comes to the D line, but Bo Nix running on our first rep on 7-on-7, so not exactly ideal. And then I always like to watch the accuracy drills when they go over and they've got the nets. And I feel like some people think it's pointless because, yeah, if you don't make it in the little square that they have for you to be able to do it, it's like, well, wide receiver's hands would have been able to caught it as long as it's in the vicinity. But when you're in a quarterback competition, I've loved watching this because each and every single time, I think it's fascinating to see how they mentally process this, right? Like some guys make it in the net and others aren't, and how they're handling it and what's going through their mind. So I was really paying attention at the accuracy drills, which is also when I walked in. I was coming from Denver Sports Daily. So I walked in on Monday and I was like, all right, here we go. Let's see what we got. All the quarterbacks, they're doing these accuracy drills. And Bo Nix is a little frustrated. You can tell he wants to be the best of the best. And he's gone through these quarterback competitions plenty. Did it at Auburn, at Oregon. Now here he is with the Broncos. And it has been fascinating to see his mentality and how vocal he is with wanting to be better. He stayed after actually for just a little bit. Probably maybe a minute, okay? Asked for another football after the drill was done and tried to make sure that he got one in the back of the net. We saw Zach Wilson get it in. Jarrett Stidham is so vocal, you guys. I wish you could actually just see and pay attention to him. Like, he is so vocal when something goes right for him. He's yelling. He's got this confidence. He's got this like, I'm the guy here on the block type of vibe. So it was really fascinating to see Bo Nix, I don't want to say get frustrated, but clearly wanted to be better in that sense. He was the only one who they were doing like the net, I don't know, like 30 yards down the field, maybe almost even 22, like not terribly far, but far enough. And he was the only one that didn't make it in the net on those long throws. So just interesting to kind of watch and see how his flow of stuff went. However, he has been talking to Davis Webb a lot, which is obviously the quarterback's coach. They're sitting down, they're going over things, and you could tell that Bo was frustrated. Davis Webb even gave him a little hit on the butt to be like, dude, you got this, like, good job. And then Bo had gone over to Mike McGlinchey and the offensive line were working out on the exact same field, but just obviously in a different part. And he walked up to him and they fist bumped. And I feel like that camaraderie, that means a lot here. You know, somebody like Mike McGlinchey, who's been in the NFL for a really long time, the fact that he is sitting here fist bumping, you got this. Training camp is hard. It's hard to be out here. So I enjoyed being able to see that too. And we actually have a really, really good quote. If you did not watch this morning's episode of Denver Sports Daily, go check it out because Mike McGlinchey talks so highly about Bo Nix, and it's really, really nice. So you're definitely going to want to hear what he has to say. Now, who am I watching as week 2 gets rolling on here? There's 2 names in particular, and I've got my notebook right here. You can see all of my notes. Let me just flip it open for you guys. There's all of my notes for everything today. And I wrote this down. Who to watch this week? Nick, let's see if you can see it. Nick Bonito and Caden Stearns were my 2 guys that I really wanted to pay attention to. And I'm really glad I did because, one, Nick Bonito got talked about from Sean at the postgame because a lot of people were like, hey, he's been looking pretty solid. And Sean had some pretty nice things to say about the growth from year 1 to year 2 under the Sean Payton defense.
He came into his own a little bit last year. He's practiced well. I think he's sudden. He's someone that really plays the edge well. I think setting the edge in the run game, is something that he'll continue to work on with his added strength. But I also feel like I'm seeing a more confident player compared to like this very day a year ago. And that's encouraging.
100%. It has been super encouraging to see what he's looked like out there. And you can tell there's just this level of growth. And I think there was a lot of frustrations last year and the year before. And he wanted more playing time, but he wasn't getting it. And it's finally his opportunity to be one of those guys that can totally shine. And I feel like we've seen a little bit about that as well. So it's been fun to watch him. Like I said, I feel like his movement has just gotten better. He looks really fresh And Sean Payton obviously speaking on the confidence from last year to this year. So been good to see on Nick Bonito. But I don't want anyone to be like, oh, Rachel, you just stole that. No, I had this. This was page 1 of my notes. Here's page 2 of my notes. So I was excited to see Nick Bonito out there as well. Another interesting fun fact was Timmy P had a vet day today, or I guess on Monday, which is a little interesting. Obviously, he's bouncing back from 2 tough training camps with his ACL and his Achilles. Just staying healthy is really good, but he had a vet day. He was on the bike for a lot of it, was still out there in full pads, but again, definitely was going through just kind of the motion and everything without actually being out there. But Greg Dulcich has not had a vet day, which I find to be rather interesting. He's been out there. I clearly think that his rehab has been going really well. Otherwise, you know what? We saw Greg Dulcich running the hills a lot in OTA and mini camp. So I think that if he was on the same level as Tim Patrick, they probably wouldn't have him out there and would have also given him a vet day. But just 2 things to know on Monday that Tim Patrick, in fact, did have a vet day, so was not rolling with them. But Greg Dulcich has not. So maybe that means positive news right there. Another competition that we got rolling on. I might be like, Rachel, how many competitions are we going to have? We have a quarterback competition. We have a running back competition. We have a wide receiver competition. We got, a secondary competition, a linebacker competition. Pretty much every single position on this Denver Broncos team is a competition, which tends to happen when you are rolling into a rebuild. And I know nobody likes that word, but yes, the Broncos are in a rebuild. But I do have good news for you as well. So stay tuned here in just a little bit, and I promise I will dive into the good news. But another competition, Trenton Gill, who's wearing number 47, by the way, keeps throwing me off, obviously, because so many people recognize Josie Jewell wearing 47. So a little weird to see Gill wearing it, but he is a punter. So we have a punter competition here, everybody, between Riley Dixon and Trenton. It's a punting competition. Like, there's not a whole lot to dive into. I feel like when the preseason games roll on, that's when we'll probably see a little bit more out of these two. They did have an extended punting period on Monday. Sean Payton pointed that out. He said it's a good competition. Punting competitions are so weird because I feel like, yes, there is a lot of skill to punting. Like, I know I couldn't go out there and do what they do. And it's also like, I don't know, it feels like such a luck of the draw, right? Like how you get the ball, how all of these things handle. I don't know. I just feel like punting competitions are so strange, so hard to evaluate. So I'm excited for the preseason games because I feel like that's going to be the best time that we have to actually be like, all right, how is Trenton looking versus Riley Dixon? What's this all going to look like? How is it going to play out? Is Trenton Dixon going to is Trenton Dixon? I'm just going to mix it too. Is Trenton Gill going to, replace Riley Dixon? Yada, yada, yada. Sean Payton obviously bringing in his guy as well. So Gill spent the past 2 years with the Chicago Bears, which is a little interesting. Just a little, it's a punting competition. What can I say, everybody? I got not a whole lot to go on about it, but just another competition that you need to have on your roster, I guess. If you're looking at the depth chart, you might be like, oh, who's this guy? Riley Dixon's been here for a long time. Little competition never hurt nobody. So another one we added to the books. Last thing, though, because I promised you guys that I was going to give you just a little bit of good news. And this Denver Broncos defense is going to be good. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I don't want to be like, oh my God, they're going to be the best. But I think we're going to see a really, really solid Broncos defense. And they have been whooping the Broncos offense. So that's a little bit of a unique thing to say, especially when you have Sean Payton out there and you're like, hey, you're very much an offensive-minded coach. But the defense looks pretty dang solid. I'm not going to lie. There's some quirks. There's some things that are going to have to be situated. The Brandon Jones thing we're going to have to get into because he's dealing with that hamstring injury. But, I've talked a lot about it, and you can see the final thing we have on our agenda today is who can be the dog? Who can be the dog that goes out there? And I talked about it, I feel like last week when Aqib Talib joined the Up and Adam show, and I was like, man, we need somebody who could be that guy. And nobody can ever be Aqib Talib. Like, that's impossible. But who's going to be the dog on this team? Who's going to have a little bit of firepower? Who's going to have a little bit of edge on this team? And John Franklin Myers joined today, the podium, or on Monday, and he spoke, and they mentioned Malcolm Roach. And he just, kind of had one of these things of like, he's that guy. Like, he's got that energy. He brings that energy. And so I'm wondering, can Malcolm Roach be that dog? Can he be the guy this team needs? Can he be the guy that's going to start a fight with the Packers when they roll into town and things are getting a little bit, pushy, shovey, all of that kind of jazz? Is he going to be that guy? So I'm excited to see him I mean, we've watched all of them really play out too. And obviously, Malcolm Roach coming from the Saints, spent 4 years there. That's why Sean Payton obviously liked him, wanted to bring him back out to Denver. And I'm just hoping that he can be that guy. And I mean, the defensive line was whooping the offenses. But on Monday, you guys, I mean, pads on, things finally got a little bit more physical. It's been really, really interesting to see as well. Then you got the linebacker position. I just feel like there's so much going on in all of these areas. But back to the defensive line. I mean, how can you not be excited? You got DJ Jones out there, right? You got Malcolm Roach. You got JFM. I have to make sure that I say his name right. You got Zach Allen. Zach Allen, too, has been one of those guys that I feel like Sean Payton has just been really high on. And I feel like we haven't really seen the ceiling for him. And actually, Sean Payton did speak about Zach Allen and how, he wants to continue to grow. We've seen the highlights. We've seen him. I feel like last year he didn't really live up to the expectations and the potential that everybody wanted to. But it seems like Sean Payton's still pretty high on him.
Well, I would still say if you asked him, he still feels like there's growth, and I think generally speaking, when you get good on one side of the ball, then your better players have a chance to really excel. And I think that the depth that around him has a chance to benefit him. So I don't want to set a bar because I've seen it exceeded too many times.
I've seen it exceeded too many times. Are you trying to be nice there, Sean Payton, or are you having some concerns about Zach Allen? I think it's probably the first answer I gave you where he does believe in him, but he has to really level up this year. Like, he's got to be a lot better, and you're trying not to talk down on a player and his confidence, because last year, like I said, I feel like we all had really high expectations for Zach Allen, and it just didn't live up to it 100%. But I know, you guys, it's been really fun. I've loved being able to go out there at practice, even though we are sweating. If you're sitting on the hill, then you totally know. And I feel for you guys. Get one of those neck fans. I just bought one for myself for training camp because they are long days. But tomorrow, practice gets extended a little bit more. It goes to 12:30. I'm wondering if they are going to have the pads on, but we will bring you guys everything you need to know, catching you up on everything today from Monday. So excited about that. And we will see you guys tomorrow to catch you up on everything that happened today on Tuesday. And we will see you guys later. Bye, everyone.